Hello, 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 everybody. This is Ebony, and I am coming to you once again with just a thought. First and foremost, shout out to all those essential workers and first responders. I am continuing to pray for you, and I believe the best of God for you and for your family. Again, I'm coming to you by way of Vaughn Therapeutic Services. Those of you who know, I am in private practice. I do a lot of work with adults, families, and children. And I wanted to stop by just to talk about something that has been prevalent in my practice. Most of the time when I send messages, I talk about things that really has to do with introspection and the way that we handle ourselves and the importance of us being patient with ourselves and knowing our value and doing those things for ourselves that helps us to develop. But today I want to talk about something that has more to do with the way that we handle the people in our lives. I often talk about how important it is to be patient with ourselves, but today I want to talk a little bit about the importance of giving the gift of acceptance and patience with our spouses and our children and those that are very close to us. Oftentimes as wives, we can be extremely critical and not just as a wife, but as a mother and or maybe the friends and family in our lives. We can be extremely critical. We can, oftentimes have high expectations for people, and when they don't meet them, we ridicule and we just become very critical and oftentimes oppressive in our communication with our spouses or with our children. And so I wanted to just kind of stop by today just to talk a little bit about that. Sometimes as women and even men, we hold these unrealistic expectations with our spouses, and we expect them to meet them. And then when they don't meet them, we create an oppressive and manipulative environment that really puts a strain on our relationships. And I'm speaking in this context specifically to married couples, but I think oftentimes it happens with our children as well when they don't meet our expectations and when they are not the children or act in a way that we expect for them to act. We can become extremely manipulative and oppressive, and sometimes it's frustrating and it can often leave people to feel hopeless, especially if the expectation that you have for them is unrealistic and it goes against who they are as people. Now, this is not to negate the fact that we are not to express our needs to our mates and that we're not supposed to have expectations for our children. But I think that there's a fine line between us trying to change people and holding unrealistic expectations. There's a fine line between that and being able to communicate what your needs are or communicate what your expectations are within a relationship. I think that it's very important to do that. But I want you to think about it. Are you extremely critical of your mate? Do you often or maybe occasionally create oppressive and manipulative environments in which that you won't be nice or you won't respond positively until you get what you want or until your spouse acknowledges or agrees with what you're saying? This is not all of us, and I would not even be presumptuous to say that it's many of us. But what I will say is that we really have to be careful in terms of how we handle people. whether it's your spouse, whether it's your children, they are still God's property. And God, expects for us to handle his children with care. Yes, that is your spouse, whether wife or husband. Yes, those are your children and they come from your loins. But guess what? Before they were yours, they were God's. And so you really have to be careful about how you handle people. When we think about our husbands, and I'm a wife of 20, going on 22 years. And I know that, there have been times when I have been found to be critical, or I have been found to be judgmental of my husband. But one thing that I have learned over the course of the years is that when I create a manipulative an oppressive environment, my marriage does not thrive. It does not help me to come to an understanding of where my husband is, or it doesn't even help him to develop an understanding of where I am. And so if we desire to be in relationships where our needs are met on both sides and where communication is flowing, you don't want to, consistently allow manipulation and that environment of oppression to bring division and to bring discord into your relationships. And again, I started off by saying it doesn't necessarily have to be that husband and wife relationship, but it can also be your children relationship. Do you put too much on your children? Do you have these expectations of them that doesn't align with who they are? Now, I'm not talking about you giving them direction and you giving them instruction. I'm not talking about, being able to protect them for what they don't know. Oftentimes we have to, protect our children from what they don't know. I'm not speaking of that. I'm thinking of your adult children. I'm thinking of, that child that you want so, much to be, one way, but they're another way. My recommendation would be to accept them for who they are and ask God to help you to guide them with the personality that they have. I've said so many times, whether in my sessions with my patients or on my videos, is since the day my children were born, I have always prayed to God to ask God to help me to parent them uniquely the way each of them needed to be parented. Now, it didn't mean that I always made the right decisions and I always did the right things, but my intention and my desire was to truly, truly parent my children the way they needed to be parented. And I could not control or fashion their personalities, but my responsibility was to help develop character in them. It was to help, guide them and teach them from right to wrong, but it was not to mold them into the person or the people that I wanted them to be. And so I say that sometimes when we hold these unrealistic expectations and when we don't create an environment of acceptance, right? We run the risk of being controlling and demanding and requiring the people in our lives to line up to what we expect. Think about it. As a wife, are you always correcting your husband? Are you always trying to change his decisions or his behaviors? Or are you taking the time to really find out who he is in his uniqueness and to accept him and to really embrace his differences? When we get into our marriage and we learn our spouses, we spend a lot of time trying to get them to be like us, and that's no fun. There's no color in that. There is no joy and two people acting the same, being in a relationship. But it's the But maturity takes place when we allow ourselves to grow, in that we allow people to be who they are, and we practice acceptance, and we limit our judgments, and we limit, those opinions that don't matter and that don't bring that don't bring agreement, that doesn't bring harmony. Sometimes we may have an opinion of something, but it doesn't mean that we need to always communicate what that opinion is. We don't always need to tell our children or tell our spouses or tell our friends when they're wrong. Sometimes we have to pray and allow God to minister that to them. Sometimes we have to learn when to be quiet and when to speak. We have to learn when our attitude isn't right and it's time for us to remove ourselves and have quality time with ourselves, so that we don't spew out our attitude and our frustration on our relationships. But more importantly, it's important for us to understand when our expectations are too high and when we are putting on other people our stuff, as opposed to communicating truly what our needs are. I hope that this message is helpful. I hope that this is something where you're able to look at it and be extremely reflective in terms of your posture in your relationships. I encourage you not only to continue and learn to be patient with yourself, but also allow your patience to spill over into your spousal relationship, into your relationship with your children, into your relationship with other people. Listen, when you think about it, the same grace that God gives us, we need to give that grace to those in our lives as well. I hope that you have an amazing day, and God bless you.